In the north of Thailand, certain roads seem to breathe with a memory older than the asphalt they're paved with. These are stories that don't just get told, they get absorbed into the landscape, clinging to the mist in the mountain passes and rising with the steam from the blacktop after a sudden monsoon downpour. A friend carried this story back with him from the highlands near Chiang Mai, and it's not the kind you can easily shake off. It's a splinter under the skin, a quiet dread that surfaces on those lonely late-night drives when the world outside your car is nothing but a roaring, featureless void. The highways that twist through the northern mountains are deceptive. By day, they are arteries of commerce and tourism, but after sunset, they transform. The familiar green canopy melts into a solid wall of shadow, a living, breathing entity that seems to press against the glass with a palpable weight. If you too feel the pull of these shadowed paths, a like on this video lets us know you're with us on this journey into the dark. My friend, Mark, had been teaching English in Chiang Mai for the better part of 3 years, long enough to feel comfortable, but not so long that the country had lost its mystery. He was driving back from Pai, a journey he'd made a dozen times before, but never this late and never this tired. He'd spent a long weekend helping a friend wrestle a new guest house into existence. It wasn't just hauling furniture, it was 3 days of battling humidity, deciphering cryptic instructions for flat-pack wardrobes, and navigating the smiling, unyielding labyrinth of local LAS permits. He was hollowed out, the kind of deep, cellular exhaustion that makes your thoughts feel like they're moving through mud. All he craved was the simple trinity of civilization: a cold shower, the drone of his air conditioner, and his own bed. The road was Highway 1095, a route that locals speak of with a mixture of pride and caution, famous for its 762 curves. By day, it's a breathtaking ribbon of asphalt, clinging to emerald mountainsides, a motorcyclist's dream. But at night, it becomes a different beast entirely, a hypnotic, coiling serpent designed to lull a weary driver into a state of highway hypnosis, where the constant left rhythm becomes a dangerous lullaby. The darkness pressing in on his little Toyota Vios wasn't just an absence of light. It felt like a physical substance, a suffocating black velvet that absorbed all sound. It muted the whine of the small engine as it strained on the inclines and swallowed the rumble of the tires on the worn pavement, leaving him in a strange, mobile pocket of silence. He'd tried the radio an hour ago, but the dial offered only a phantom hiss of static crackling between distant frequencies, the sound of a dead conversation that only made the solitude feel sharper, more profound. The painted white lines on the road became his entire universe, a fragile thread of reality materializing in the narrow cone of his headlights and immediately being devoured by the abyss in his rearview mirror. He hadn't seen another pair of headlights, not a single flickering taillight, for what felt like an eternity. It was a loneliness so complete, it was almost theological, the chilling sensation of being the last man on a dying planet. It was on a particularly vicious hairpin turn, an ascending curve that forced him to drop his speed to a crawl, that his headlights snagged on it. At first, it was just a flaw in the darkness, a smudge of indeterminate gray at the very edge of his beams that didn't belong. His exhausted mind, slow to process, offered up a list of mundane explanations. A fallen palm frond, slick and dark with moisture. A piece of roadkill, a dog maybe. or perhaps a sack of rice or cabbages that had vibrated off the back of a farm truck. But as the car crept forward, meter by agonizing meter, the shape resolved itself with a disturbing geometric clarity. It was too uniform for an animal, too neat or a fallen branch. It was a bundle, lying with an unnerving stillness directly in the center of his lane. It had the distinct shape of a rolled-up plastic sleeping mat, the cheap, thin kind you see for 50 baht at any outdoor market. But its placement was an act of profound negligence. Leaving it here, on a blind curve, was a death sentence for the next motorcyclist to come flying around the bend. A string of curses, low and weary, escaped his lips. The rational, exhausted part of his brain, the part that just wanted to be home, was screaming at him, "Just swerve, go around it, it's not your problem." But another voice, the stubborn, conscientious teacher in him, the man who spent his days trying to impose a little order on the world, wouldn't let it go. What if it caused an accident? What if someone got hurt because he was too tired to do the decent thing? With a sigh that felt like it came from his bones, he pulled the car onto the dangerously narrow gravel shoulder. The crunch of the tires was shockingly loud. He killed the engine, and the world fell away. The sudden, absolute silence was a physical blow, a change in pressure that made his ears pop. It lasted only a heartbeat before the jungle's true voice rushed in to fill the void, a deafening, multi-layered symphony of a billion unseen lives. The high-pitched electric drone of cicadas, the basso-profundo croak of bullfrogs, the frantic clicking and chirping of insects he couldn't name. He opened the car door and stepped out into a wall of air so thick and humid it felt like he could drink it, heavy with the smell of wet earth, the heady perfume of night-blooming jasmine, and something else underneath, the faint, sour tang of decay that always hangs in the deep forest. The flashlight app on his phone cast a nervous, trembling beam that seemed pathetically weak against the oppressive dark. The bundle was roughly the length of a person, maybe a little longer, wrapped in a faded red and white checkered plastic mat, the kind every Thai family seems to own for picnics by the river. It was grimy, streaked with mud and slick with dew. But it was the rope that held his attention, that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. It was bound obsessively with cheap, bright blue nylon rope, the kind used for mooring boats or tying down tarps. The knots weren't functional. They were a frantic, tangled prayer. They were layered over one another, a complex geometry of containment, as if they were designed not just to hold the mat closed, but to hold something in. As he drew closer, a new smell cut through the jungle's perfume. It was a cloying, sickly sweetness, like jasmine flowers left to rot in a vase of stagnant water for a week. And under that, something else, a faint but insistent coppery tang that made the back of his throat itch. It reminded him of old pennies, of a nosebleed, of dried blood. Every survival instinct he possessed, honed over millennia of evolution, began to scream a single, frantic message in his prefrontal cortex. This is wrong. This is deeply, fundamentally wrong. Go back to the car. Leave now. He stood frozen a few feet away, the jungle buzzing and clicking around him, a constant, unnerving pressure. The voice of civic duty was still there, but it was a faint whisper now against the rising roar of his fear. Just nudge it with your foot.
Drag it to the side of the road and go. It'll take 10 seconds. He took a hesitant step forward, extending his foot, aiming to just nudge it, to test its weight before committing to touching it with his bare hands. His worn leather sandal was an inch, maybe less, from the grimy, dew-slicked plastic. And the bundle moved. It wasn't a big movement. It was a slight internal shift, a slow, subtle contraction, as if whatever was sealed inside had just taken a long, sighing breath after being asleep for an age. Mark snatched his foot back as if the mat were red hot. He froze, heart hammering against his ribs, telling himself it was a trick of the light, a muscle spasm in his tired leg. In that exact, heart-stopping moment of self-doubt, the world went silent. Not quiet, not faded. The roaring symphony of the jungle was cut off, as if a switch had been thrown, plunging him into a profound, unnatural vacuum. The pressure in his ears returned. A dead void that was 1,000 times more terrifying than the noise it had replaced. He stood there, trembling, his phone's light a shaking spotlight on the bundle, his own ragged breathing the only sound in the universe. It moved again, unmistakable this time. A slow, serpentine undulation rippled down its length from one end to the other. It was the horrifying, articulate movement of a spine uncurling, of a long, thin body stretching within its confines. The tick crinkled audibly in the dead silence, not a dry rustle, but a wet, heavy, tearing sound, as if it were sticking to something moist inside. He didn't scream. The sound was a solid ball of ice lodged in his throat. He just made a choked, guttural noise as he scrambled backward, tripping over his own feet and landing hard on the asphalt. The pain was distant, unreal. His mind was a white-hot blank of pure animal terror.
He turned and ran for the car, the door handle feeling alien and clumsy in his sweaty palm. He threw himself inside, fumbling the key into the ignition, the metallic scrape deafening in the profound silence. The engine roared to life, a beautiful, profane noise that shattered the spell. He didn't check for traffic, didn't signal. He wrenched the wheel, swinging wide into the opposite lane, giving the thing on the road as wide a berth as the narrow highway would allow. As his headlights swept past it, he risked a single, fleeting glance. It was just a still, inert lump of trash again, a rolled-up mat on the road. For one terrifying, sanity-shredding second, he wondered if he had finally broken, if the exhaustion had conjured the whole nightmare. Then the curve was behind him. He drove the rest of the way to Chiang Mai with his foot pressed so hard on the accelerator that his leg began to cramp, every interior light in the car blazing, the radio turned up to full volume, blasting meaningless static. His eyes darted constantly to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a shape unfolding itself in the back seat, a silhouette rising against the rear window. There was only ever the empty, winding road, disappearing into the oppressive and now very much alive dark. The next morning, sleep-deprived and vibrating with residual adrenaline, he sat in the bright, sterile light of the school staff room. The cheerful posters on the wall and the smell of instant coffee felt like a scene from another man's life. He tried to tell an older Thai teacher, Ploy, about the strange garbage he'd found. He told the story haltingly, feeling foolish, expecting her to laugh at the overtired foreigner spooked by shadows on a mountain road.
She didn't laugh. As he spoke, her gentle, crinkled smile vanished, replaced by a profound seriousness that chilled him more than the memory itself. She put her teacup down on its saucer with a delicate, deliberate click. "You did not touch it, Mark?" she asked, her voice quiet but intense, cutting through the room's mundane chatter. "No," he said, his own voice barely a whisper. "I was about to, but it moved." She closed her eyes for a long moment, letting out a slow, controlled breath. "You are very, very lucky," she said, opening them again. She wasn't looking at him with amusement, but with a deep, sad pity in her eyes. The
look one gives to a child who has wandered to the edge of a cliff without realizing the danger. She explained, in that same hushed tone, that when someone dies a bad death, a violent, sudden death, far from home, with no family to perform the rites, their spirit can become trapped here. They become a pi tai hong, a ghost raging with the anger and confusion of their final moments. Sometimes, she continued, leaning forward, her voice dropping even lower, a family is so tormented by this spirit they cannot rest. So they go to a master, an ajarn. They perform a ritual to bind the vengeful spirit into a vessel, a doll, a clay pot, or something bigger. They seal it with sacred knots and powerful blessings. And then they just leave it on a road? Mark asked, the cough, he turning to acid in his stomach. They leave it on a road between places, a place of transition, Ploy confirmed, her gaze unwavering. They leave it where a stranger will find it. They hope someone curious or someone helpful like you will stop. They hope that person will see a piece of trash and want to move it. They hope that person will untie the knots. She paused, letting the full weight of her next words settle on him. When the knots are untied, the first spirit is set free from its torment, but the magic needs a vessel. It cannot exist in empty air. The one who opens it, they take the burden. They become the new prison. They take the spirit's place. She said no more, just watched him, her expression one of deep sorrow for the abyss he had unknowingly peered into. She told him to go to the temple that afternoon, to make merit for his own protection, and to never, ever stop for something left on a mountain road at night again. Mark still lives and teaches in Chiang Mai, but his relationship with the beautiful, empty spaces of the country has been permanently altered. He sold that little Toyota a week after the incident, unable to shake the feeling that a permanent cold spot had taken root in the fabric of the back seat, a place where the window would fog up for no reason on a hot day. He takes buses now, finding a strange comfort in the press of other bodies, the constant noise of conversations, the anonymous safety of the herd. He avoids renting cars, and he will never again drive in the mountains after dark. And he says that sometimes, on a hot, still night, when the air is thick and hangs heavy before a storm, he'll catch a whiff of it on the breeze, even in the bustling heart of the city.
that cloying sweetness of rot and perfume, of death trying to disguise itself as life, a faint, passing reminder of what's still out there, wrapped in plastic and bound by knots, waiting patiently in the dark, on the spine of the earth, for someone just a little more curious or a little more helpful to finally stop and lend a hand.